want to thank everybody for joining us today. Um, Dean, if you can go to the second slide. Um, what you had seen in some emails from myself and some other folks from CyberSecOp is we're actually starting an educational or informational webinar series. This is the first one of them. And what we've heard from a lot of our customers is, they want to have an opportunity to hear about what's new, what's coming, and not always 100% directed to the thing that they need right this moment, but in many cases, some of these things are. And at the very back end, you'll see some of the topics that we've got coming up, but they range everywhere from impact of managed SOC, what's going on in the cyber insurance world, and I'll share that at the very back end. Dean, if you can go to the second slide. So the whole purpose for what we're doing is to sit down and really take and kind of magnify this concept of this layered approach. And everything that we're going to be talking about on and what you're hearing from your CISOs and what you should be hearing from your security advisors is how the things that you are doing and the goals that are being set for you fit into this layered approach. And on the next slide specifically, you'll see where Island.io touches all of these elements. So what Dean is going to set up for you is a conversation, educational conversation about what a secure browser can do for you, how it touches things like data governance, how it affects security awareness, not the training of it, but the reinforcement of the concept, what it's doing from just a pure security perspective and even DLP. So I want to turn it over to Dean. Thank you very much for coming on board for this first in a series of every 2-week opportunities. And Dean, take it away.
Thank you, Christopher. Appreciate the opportunity and everyone's time today. I'm going to run through probably about 4 slides very quickly in a kind of speed dating fashion to really get an opportunity to show you a little bit, just a little bit in the time we have together today of the enterprise browser's capabilities. I think when we look at the first title of this slide, it's very indicative of just the shift that we're starting to see within Island, and we call it an enterprise reason or browser for a reason. And that being, if we just look at essentially the security objectives, some of what Christopher was talking about, of granting audiences and our internal users as well. So whether they're external, we're outsourcing via BPO contractors, or we want to support BYO initiatives as a whole, is generally what we've had concerns is granting access to the applications and undoubtedly protecting the data as being a primary objective for that. And when we look at what we've had to work with to this point, it's the most widely deployed application inside of every organization is undoubtedly the web browser. But fundamentally, that web browser that we're bringing in to access our apps and our data wasn't built with enterprise objectives in mind. It was built for the consumer audiences, for content delivery, tracking of their interactions, and obviously providing them with a meaningful experience for those social media apps and shopping interactions. But as such, the enterprise, we've said, hold on a second, we have to have a very different look at what that web browser is doing, meaning where's it trying to go, leveraging proxies and web gateways, and then doing sandboxing to detonate potential files of interest, and then doing DLP and break and inspect technologies, just so we can get it to cooperate in a manner that adheres to our security objectives. And then along came the remote workforce, whether it was third parties or whether it was that BYO initiatives. And we can say it had a massive influx when COVID came around. And suddenly we had to ask more of our VPN initiatives. We had to then say, do I spin up a VDI instance or a desktop as a service in order to obtain the objective of controlling access to the application and the data itself? And we looked at that at Island as an opportunity for us to really address this directly inside of the browser itself. And if you think about it, we haven't rethought how we access web, SaaS, and cloud properties in over a decade. We've fundamentally been surrounding it with more technology stack, especially as we went from on-prem to cloud. So what we did is we took a look at the major modern browsers, whether it's Chrome, Edge, Brave, Opera, and so forth, and all have a consistent foundation of the Chromium open source project. We took a fork of that Chromium open source project, stripped out the consumer elements that were focused on that tracking, that content delivery. But what's critical is we maintained all of the rendering engines, the same codecs, the same networking stack to ensure application compatibility. If it renders in Chrome and Edge, it renders in Island. The extension ecosystem was really, has transitioned to become a productivity gain. But putting on a security hat, I start to get concerned because every extension now has different entitlements to my data. Every extension claims they're supporting AI, and the T's and C's of those extensions now claim they own the rights to that content in perpetuity. That's problematic for me as a data security practitioner for 15 years. And so, how can an enterprise browser help me address that? The other thing that's critically important when we look at just the customers that we've earned as Island customers and partners is the user experience. I don't have to train a single user on how to leverage the Island browser. It looks and feels like any other Chromium-based browser. Now, where we pivoted our focus is then to what would the enterprise requirements look like for it to be an enterprise browser or a secure browser, as Christopher referenced. Is enterprise trust in our context is we tie into your identity stack. So when you launch Island, the first thing you're required to do is authenticate to the browser. I immediately establish context to understand it's Dean Carey that's in the IT department, and as such has these claims and entitlements to applications and policy to govern over his interaction with applications. What I also do at the same time, and this aligns to a lot of zero trust initiatives, is I perform device posture on a continuous basis. So if I should be running CrowdStrike or Sentinel-1, have this cert, AD joined, full disk encryption enabled for me to be deemed to be on a corporate managed gold image asset, I can attest to that. And we do this device posture at every new tab, page refresh, or navigation. So we're continuously assessing if anything changed on that device, and we can pivot the entire browser's experience dynamically based on those conditions changing. Now, when you think of least privilege in that context, and this ties into a lot of the CMMC requirements and the CUI requirements, is last mile control is where and when you choose to assert that least privilege or that control directly of interaction at the presentation layer. Now the browser is giving me the ability to control directly, cut, copy, paste, save as, upload, download, screenshot, screen sharing, printing, because it is that direct point of interaction where it occurs from a click to input with keystrokes. Now, the other thing we've seen is it's referenced here as browser-based RPA. Think of it as we all have applications that contain sensitive data. And where and when I choose to assert that this group of individuals, based on their role, even though they have access to the application, what if I could say they shouldn't see that content, whether it's a social security number or a credit card number, whatever you deem intellectual property? Because we're the browser and we control the presentation layer, at time of page loading and content rendering, I can say, if you see that data, redact that data for this group of users. Do not allow them to reveal or unredact that data, keep it redacted without changing anything in the back end of the app. We don't want to break automations and workflows. I'm just controlling what's available on glass. Now, last two things I'll touch on: productivity and user experience. I've been on the vendor side, cyber, for over 25 years now, and it's the first time where we've ever had an R&D team dedicated solely to user experience and productivity. And there's a reason for that. As we look at users being inside of that browser for 80 to 100% of their day, depending on their role in an organization, we undoubtedly want them to have the most effective, productive, and best experience inside of the browser. And so we put a lot of initiatives around that experience as a whole, and I'll show you examples. Now, think of the visibility aspect, and this kind of ties into what Christopher had referenced around the managed SIEM, SOC aspects of things, as well as now we have the opportunity to say where and when I want to assure to my users their right to privacy and anonymity when they go to a personal banking or healthcare sites. We'll anonymize user identifiers, machine identifiers. But when they go to the sensitive business application that contains highly regulated or sensitive data, I want full visibility. I can show you a screenshot of what they're looking at. I can highlight for you what they clicked on, and I can capture keyboard input where and when you want. So last slide before we get over to showing you it. These are just some examples of use cases that we've learned and worked with our customers, whether it was taking third-party contractors, BPOs, from an onboarding experience where we decide, do we hard ship laptops? Do we spin up a VDI instance? What's the scale of that infrastructure and the cost for it? and BYOD initiatives to being able to say, what if I could onboard contractors in 5 minutes? One of the customers I worked with in the pharmaceutical industry onboards now 20,000 contractors. When they add a new one, 5 minutes. They add them to their directory services. They get an email invitation, create a password, instruction to download the Island browser. We install in user space, so there's no contention with admin or lockdown devices. They install it, authenticate to the browser, and they're immediately presented with their workspace of entitlements. And whether we want to restrict any other interactions or any other activity inside of that browser, we can do so because policy is enforced directly in the browser itself. Now, the other use case that we've seen with this that popped up recently, same thing with this pharmaceutical customer, it was planning around ransomware. And it was the contingency that if we have any user report any behavior that we believe is ransomware, it is shut the lid on your laptop, power down your desktop, step away, go home, launch the Island browser, you're back up and running. So that resiliency they actually invoked because they were impacted by the CrowdStrike issue that happened a couple months ago. And any users that were contacting the help desk immediately were instructed, go home, launch the Island browser, you're back up and running. So just different ways that I think we've learned through the interactions with our customers around use cases and examples of where Island can be effective for them.
One thing I want to add to kind of reinforce what Dean's talking about, and I think this is an important note on everything he's talked about and everything you'll see going forward. All of these controls are as granular as you want them. This could be entire corporation has the same policy, departmental policy, individuals within a department. If you wanted to, if someone was on like a 3-month kind of probation before they're full time, you can restrict what they watch what they're doing. So you can open and close these based on compliance policies, corporate culture, traditional risk, and you could also tighten and loosen based on traditional departments like HR might be tighter, financial services or accounting might be tighter than say whatever your kind of day-to-day business operation might be. So that's one of the beauties of this is that you have full control of how loose or stringent, using those words, you want it to be and can be changed at any time. And that's where you even get into the user analytics, right? That aspect of it, being able to kind of see what's going on, allow something to happen, but it becomes the application learns behavior. So it will notice if someone normally does these things and all of a sudden now they're doing something different. Are they possibly leaving? Or are they possibly moving something? Do we have any concern? So I'll let Dean kind of carry on with the demo, but I wanted you to kind of see that. And the other thing that came up for who's the use case, this is probably like the minimum size account is probably 100 users would be kind of the minimum. There is no maximum. Island and secure browsers fit in as large an organization as possible, but I'd probably say 100 is probably the break point. You could do less, but you're kind of paying for 100 in a way. But I think that's kind of the bottom of where this makes the most sense. Unless you're highly regulated, then the value is there, even if you're 50 people. So Dean, I apologize, just keep going.
No, I appreciate that, Christopher. And to your point, even the customers that we have that have less than 100 users, we work with them to obviously find the right value price point. But what was interesting when they were looking at Island, it was a matter of what can they take off of the table or what can they collapse in the way of technology and spend. And so for many, it was things like DLP, CASB, it was web categorization and URL filtering, it was some aspects of VDI. So even for smaller customer bases, there's a significant opportunity to, one, change the user experience into something more positive if we are talking VDI, but two, to reduce costs based on the other technologies that you may have been looking at and saying, we just don't have the manpower to manage all of these disparate technologies or the expertise in those fields to really configure things properly. So with that, I'm going to pivot over just to show you now some examples of the technology in use. So I'm here in two different personas, even though I'm on the same device, and it's just to show you I can have multiple profiles, multiple instances of a user or users operating on a same device in shared device scenarios, or I have a privileged admin account that I may need to use. So in this example of the user on the right, I'm authenticated in. And as I had said at first, you're required to authenticate to the browser. So I've authenticated in my tenant in this example is tied to Azure, whether it's Azure, Okta, Ping, SailPoint, any IDP. I have context, dcarry@mylabs.net, that's in the IT department. As such, here's his claims and entitlements of his workspace experience. On the left-hand side, I'm authenticating in as a third-party contractor. As such, I want to present them with the terms of service while they're interacting with our workspace and our application. So as such, just by that persona or that profile, a very different workspace experience you can see by way of the background, but also the entitlements of what applications I have access to. So I'm going to bring up two examples side by side so you can kind of see a reference of just the controls when now I'm bringing that directly to the point of interaction. So when I think of third-party contractor, what if I need to grant them access to an application, but I don't want them to know the credentials? And I think of provisioning and deprovisioning scenarios. In this case, I've deliberately leveraged our built-in privileged access management, or if you already have something like a CyberArk or a HashiFold or Secrets Manager, we can integrate with that. In this case, I don't want them to know the creds. They have no way to see the eyeball and reveal that. And you'll notice right away there's a very different experience with the contractor persona on the left versus the user on the right. And I'll bring the two just a little more expanded so we can see. The one on the left, obviously, a fair bit going on. I'll bring it full screen. You can see I've chosen deliberately to put the CyberSecOp corporate logo as a watermark in the background, letting them know they are accessing the CyberSecOp business application. I've also layered in a QR code where you can set it to capture first name, last name, host name, IP address, email address, date, timestamp, whatever you want. That visibility is coming back to your SIM and analytic platform. So again, just in control of that entire experience. In the other case of provisioning and deprovisioning, for the contractor, just by way of the Island browser, I'm saying February 28th is the last day of this engagement or the term of this engagement. March 1st, this contractor will no longer be able to access Salesforce just by way of Island. So different examples of just scenarios that you can consider. Now, when I think of a contractor interacting with my business application and data, generally I want to assert control over that data's movement, what they can do with that. So in this case, they attempt to do a save as. I want to restrict that. I do not want them saving my business application locally to disk because I have no idea or enforcement of what's running locally on their third-party device. If they try to do something like a print of that sensitive data, again, deliberately in control of that. The other thing you may have noticed if anybody's keeping an eye quickly, because it's the browser, I control it end to end. No view page source, no developer tools. I control they cannot run incognito. I'm in control of all extensions. And more importantly, where and when extensions can run. Extensions now state AI support, T's and C's. We own the right to that content in perpetuity. Problematic for me if that extension has access to my business applications and data. The user on the right-hand side, I go to perform that print function. Again, this is Dean Carey in the IT department. If he's maybe printing to the second floor printer in part of finance, for example, I'll allow that to print. If he tries to print anywhere else, I can restrict that. In this case, I want to warn him and have him provide a business justification that we've now captured from an audit trail perspective as to why he needs to actually save that content or print it. In this case, I can control that the only thing that he will do in the way of a print function is print it to PDF. Now what I'm doing is scanning it from an anti-malware, from a DLP perspective, and then asserting logic to say, hey, there's sensitive data on that page. I will not allow you to actually save that to a PDF format as well. I could allow it, force it to be saved to another location. So here's an example where just because content exists in an application and on a page does not mean I need it to be available to other users. Let me just go ahead. I've been on back-to-back demos. So let me refresh this, come down, and what you'll now see is I have two different references of clearly credit card information that exists in this exact same area of Salesforce. For the third-party contractor, I do not want them, or they do not have a business need to see that data. Not changing anything in the back end of Salesforce, just controlling what's seen on glass for the user. So they try to click on it to reveal that data. I cannot reveal that content. I've permanently ensured it's redacted for that user. My Dean Carey in the IT department user, I've wanted to ensure they have access with business justification to see that data. Maybe there's a business need or use case. They try to capture that data and copy it. I'm in control now. Again, remember at the beginning I had said, now I have the opportunity to bring control, and Christopher talked about granularity. I can assert control at interaction, whether that's copy, click, or input. So I've also determined I don't want in this field in Salesforce, what would be the equivalent of a social security number being inserted. I can control that input now for the first time if I do need that level of dexterity or granularity. So a couple other things I'll show you. Where and when we want, when a user is going to a sensitive area of an application, I can, for any app, layer in things like MFA into a workflow where it doesn't exist. I want to attest to the fact that that is the user and ensure that they are or should have access to that sensitive data within that application. And again, even for Dean Carey in the IT department, I've chosen to layer in the watermark and QR code. In this case, a different reference where I can leverage column level redaction or table level redaction. I've again given Dean Carey the ability to click on it, have visibility into that actual data. I could have kept that redacted from his view as well. So here's a couple other examples. I undoubtedly want control of that data's movement. A user is interacting with it, and I'll bring up something just to show productivity. The user comes over, and this is the Island Clipboard Manager. They attempt to capture that hey looking bit of data. You can see it now gets published into the top of the Island Clipboard Manager. I need that data to move between my approved business applications. So Salesforce to O365, I want to permit that to happen. I come over to what I consider personal Gmail because I can distinguish tenancy. I'm now in my Island corporate Gmail. Personal Gmail, very different set of governance, but I'm assuring the user is aware of their right to privacy and anonymity, but my business data cannot move to it. Notice these clips are now redacted. As I move back to my business applications, the Clipboard Manager recognizes and adheres to the application and data boundaries. I try to take the data out to something local like Notepad++, not permitted by policy. If I come back to Salesforce and I want to do something like a screenshot or any sort of snipping, again, we recognize that and we'll ensure that data cannot be screenshot, whether it's snipping tool, Snagit, anything I've given OS level permissions to. Now, one of the things that we always work on with users is phishing awareness and readiness. What if the browser actually gave us and contributed to that for us now as well? User gets an email, looks legitimately intentional or deliberate, comes from dean.at island.io. The user clicks on it. And again, this isn't a perfect example, but what one really is. In this case, the user gets redirected, definitely looks legit to them for the most part. They attempt to put in their corporate credentials. I now have the ability to leverage the anti-phishing capabilities within Island to say any applications or resources you attempt to register or authenticate to that are outside of our business applications, I want to restrict that movement. So last thing I'm going to show very, very quickly, a ton that we didn't get to. In Island, we have RDP, SSH brought into it. We've brought a password manager. You can embrace AI, whether it's ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini, by asserting those same controls I've shown with Salesforce. I can assert that over the AI capabilities. And really what we're looking at is now in our management platform, what's that visibility I now get back to my SIM analytic? And I think this is something that was one of the most impressive for our customers is, remember I talked about presentation layer. Now I'm giving you that layer 7 visibility at click, keystroke, DLP user input. It was a cut, copy, where and when I've chosen. And when I see click, I can actually go in, give you visibility into all of what you would consider the metadata, the event information. I can actually show you a screenshot of what the user was looking at on the page and actually what they clicked on that page, and where and when you've chosen to capture keystrokes, I can highlight and identify those for you as well. So I know we're almost up on time. I do want to come back to the slides. Obviously, happy to open it up for any questions. There's a ton of other things and use cases that we could show with Island. But I do know Christopher wanted to close out on this slide as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, and we're going to respond back to any of the questions that we've received that we haven't been able to get to, but we will put out a link to the recording. We'll follow up with a one-pager like it says on the screen. Anybody that wants to have a deeper dive with Dean or anybody else from Island, along with your CyberSecOp vCISO or security advisor, we can set that up. But what we are doing, like we mentioned in some of the emails you saw, is we're running an every 2-week come if you're interested webinar series, all educational. The next one is locked in, which is the importance or the impact of managed SOC. But what I'm planning on doing is having the list sent out to those of you that attended and everybody that's been registering to see, what do you want? What do I have that might be 15th on the list that should be third, right? And what should be dropped down? So we want to get some input on what's important to our customers. And this might be the best way to do that, is put together a little bit of a survey to see the topics you want to see. Dean, I really want to thank you so much. Guys, thank you very much for attending. We'll get this copy out as soon as it becomes available. And I really appreciate you investing the time with us. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.